Well, hello. Today we are going to be taking a look at one of the fundamental grammar and writing question types that you'll encounter on the SAT writing and language section, namely subject-verb agreement. Now, even on the old SAT, this was a question type that was major, but for many students very tough to actually spot. And it continues to be a bit of a priority on the new SAT as well. So why not figure out the rules that we're going to need to start making sense of this one? Because, like many of the types of errors that you will encounter on SAT grammar, you're going to need very keen attention to detail, and you can't just assume that knowing the meaning of a sentence is enough to work with it. So take a look at this one. Do you actually see anything wrong with the following sentence? The players accused of complying with Arnold Rothstein and rigging World Series was ultimately revealed to public scrutiny. Now, there are a few things about that. First of all, it seems like a pretty logical thought. In this case, it's actually about a scandal in Major League Baseball that happened in the early 20th century. And if you look at the rest of it, it seems to have nice flow, it seems to have discernible subjects. There's nothing really that seems to trip this one up too much unless you know the kinds of clues you should be looking for. Because if you don't see anything wrong, then you simply might not be familiar with the version of subject-verb disagreement that predominates on the SAT, because often this is a matter of just one letter or one word being thrown off. So how does all that work, and how do you get around this? Well, basic definition. Subject-verb agreement involves pairing singular with singular and plural with plural. So if you were to take this at a very basic level, you would have something like, say, just a very simple sentence. He walked to the store. You would not say, he walked to the store. You would say, he walks, with an S at the end, and you'd have to be a child not to see that. But the truth is, the SAT is going to make you deal with much longer sentences, much more complex ones, and ones that are going to have other nouns that distract you from the sentence. So, okay, take another simple sentence. The student works on several math problems. Well, you wouldn't say the student work, no S, has to be the student works. But if we had the sentence, the student who was enrolled in a variety of courses at the university level, a few of which were calculus and statistics, along with humanities elective, by the time we get to the verb, work, works, you've had a bunch of other nouns gumming that up. So what you're going to need to do is find the subject and check number very aggressively. And what you're going to need to look for is a fundamental pairing, like he is, or they are, for a singular and a plural, respectively. And then, even if you have a little trouble figuring out what that is at a first run, think about what noun is actually going to take some meaningful kind of action. So you may have a sentence with, let's say, it's a fundamental pairing between he and is. Well, you may have other nouns that are throwing that off. You may have an entire descriptive phrase that is going to make life a lot more difficult. But you can find the verb and start asking yourself, okay, what is actually doing the action? What is being? What is or are? And then you get that back down to the he. So follow those. And you're going to start seeing that each sentence will be constructed to make plenty of sense. It's just number that you have to think about. And so, now that we get a second look at this sentence, let's think a little about logic and number, both of those things. So first of all, what is the subject of this sentence? If looking at it the first time you had players, because it's a very central topic and it's what's the noun that is taking a bunch of actions here, then you're in good shape. then what you have to do is be ready to avoid some of the traps we just noticed. So you've got to be ready to disregard descriptions, prepositional phrases, phrases between punctuation. Sometimes these are easy to spot, like anything that's in parentheses will probably not have a subject of the main sentence in it. But if you have prepositions like of or in, and we've got both of those in the sentence, or with, these cannot actually contain subject nouns. They'll contain object nouns, and for what you need to know for the time being, object nouns do not actually take verbs. They don't actually perform actions. There are more distinctions, but that's the important one. For subject-verb, they don't matter. And look at all these object nouns we have that we can start getting rid of. Of complying with Arnold Rothstein in Rigging the World Series. All of that prepositional phrase you would disregard in order to figure out your subject-verb combination, and then what do you wind up with? Well, players will take some action. The players are the ones who would be revealed in the context of this sentence. They're going to have the action. Someone's revealing them. And, well, still makes sense except for the one word was, because, again, reduce us all down. No one who is a thinking adult, or I don't know, just maybe using some really weird slang, which is not acceptable on the SAT, would say something like players was. It's going to instead be very quick correction. Now that the nouns have been identified for ordering, the players were revealed. That's your basic unit for the sentence. And so I guess the one thing that I would emphasize here is we've seen all these nouns that come in the middle of the core subject and the core verb. But you can get other configurations for those. And what you would just want to think about is, one, some rules of thumb, like you disregard those intervening nouns. And as long as you can then figure out what noun is really taking what action here, then you can use enough logic to navigate through a lot of other different challenges that subject-verb may give you. And now, some practice questions. So, as usual, take a little time and work through the following sentence exercises. So what you'll be asked to do is identify an error. In each of the following sentences, there will be exactly one error involving subject-verb, and you're going to want to look very closely to figure out what's going on here. Because actually, some of these will have multiple verbs in them. Some of these all of them are going to have multiple nouns, and in addition to just getting the error, what I'd like you to do is make sure that you are going to figure out what the subject is. That's the way I do it if I were looking at these, because identifying subject and verb, it's so fundamental and it'll set you up for other error types too. So, watch for the subjects and verbs, figure out the positioning of those two elements of the sentence, and correct any real problems that we have going on here. This should take maybe about 1 or 2 minutes. So, take that time. I'll be right here waiting, and then we can move on to look at the correct answers. Okay, take maybe about another 30 seconds or so work with anything else you need here, and then we'll continue on. Okay, and now let's take a look at the correct answers. So make sure that you were able to identify both subject and verb and see how well you did with these. Now, here they are. For the first one, what you probably should have caught on to from what we talked about earlier is that you have some different prepositional phrases. So, to several small lakes, prepositional phrase. By the mountains, prepositional phrase. And you'll notice those don't really have any actions that they can take because, well, one, structure, but also what is difficult to navigate. In that sentence, the road is going to be the thing that actually is difficult. Now, could mountains be difficult to navigate? Yes, definitely, but the sentence is not structured that way, and that's what you need to look for, always. Now, the second one. The thing you should have looked for here is, okay, we don't quite have prepositions, or we don't have these object nouns that are as easily distractions, and frankly flow together with the rest of the sentence a bit. Instead, we have an entire phrase between commas, which was premised on this, that, and the other thing. So what should you do with that? Remember from what we talked about earlier, that will typically not contain a subject, and that's why you would eliminate it, at least from your thinking on this question type. Because what in the structure of the sentence and the logic of the sentence has encountered objections? Well, the experiment has encountered objections. So, the trap really is that some of the other nouns would be plural in that sentence. And so maybe you'd wonder, is it have or has? No, if it's the experiment that's really a problem for some of the other researchers. Plural noun, but not our subject. And the final one, this is a little unusual, and it's a question type that requires you probably to really make the logic work, because the word there is not your subject. The word carbon emissions technically is not your subject either. I mean, look at that. It's an important topic, but it comes after the preposition for, so you eliminate this. But there are strategies. So what are there in the format of the sentence? Well, this is something called inverted subject verb. Notice the way that we have are and then strategies. The word there is actually not a subject. It just indicates situation, or maybe more commonly physical place. But here it's just saying, here, this is the arrangement. This is what's going on. But the idea is strategies are there. That is what is going to take the action. The strategies are present. And so you have to get used to this as well, because you can, in all sorts of English language constructions, have verb go before subject, and it's perfectly fine. And that is something that's harder to see, perhaps, when you're dealing with a full passage. But if you keep all this in mind, look for structure, look for logic, and then test out the numbers, you're going to be able to apply these subject-verb error skills to all sorts of passages on the actual writing and language section. And so the best thing maybe to do now, if you want more practice with this question type, is to check out some of our books. I mean, we have two that might be quite useful. With the SAT Guide to Grammar Strategy, you get an entire chapter that both shows you how to work with the stranger configurations of subject-verb that we've hinted at, and how to extend these skills to other questions in sentence structure and in working with nouns, fragments, all sorts of things. Or, If you feel that you're ready to test your skills out on full sections, you might take a look at the SAT Guide, its companion book, the SAT Writing Book of New Grammar Tests. It's 8 full sections, and you'll see how subject-verb lines up with all sorts of other skills that you will have to pull together for excellent performance on this part of the test. You're also perfectly welcome to visit us at prepvantagetutoring.com to schedule a class or a lesson. We're available for all sorts of online consultations with the SAT, the ACT, PSAT, and college essay, so the skills and effective writing that you're learning here can be applied to virtually any element of your college application and your education in getting the best acceptances possible. Until next time, we look forward to seeing you hopefully on the web and look forward to more lessons. They're on the way. Take care, and until then.